Welcome to the Clause YouTube channel.
Together, we strive for a safer, secure, and more stable world.
Here, it's wonderful. I always enjoy being at Clause. And before we start this conversation, I want to give you certain initial impressions of the book, which has been written by Jen Pandey. This book when you start reading this book, it is very apparent. It is labor of love and a lot of practitioners' experiences which have been embedded in this book. The other impression that I gathered when I was reading this book was it's like a bestseller. When you see a book on strategy, the first thing is, you keep it on the side and you say, okay, after a cup of coffee or in the evening while, you are having a little drink, you need to read it, so that you are patient. But this is a book which is like a bestseller. And the reason why it is like a bestseller is that he's put in a lot of his personal I was, sometimes coffee is also copyrighted, particularly when we are talking about books. So he's put in a lot of his personal experiences into it, and he has touched the chords which any normal human being would like to experience. You don't have to be in uniform. I think any normal human being wants to read, particularly when you spoke about and you wrote about your experiences in Siachen as to how it happened, certain experiences and certain things that he has written about in this book regarding what happened during Op Vijay, how those plans came out, how how it got executed. And the one important thing that I learned in this book, which I was personally not aware of, because I'm a great admirer of that general, was General Jahangir Karamat from the Pakistan Army. I did not know he relinquished or demitted office 3 months prior, and possibly the plan of this Op Vijay, he was not approved by him, and that was the reason why he was made to demit office early. So, sir, many compliments to you for an outstanding piece of work, and to take this conversation forward. Uh, General Pandey in his book has also demolished this Western thought which people like John Doe and George Tanham have been saying. India lacks strategic culture. He's really demolished that thought. And to take it on forward, I'll request you. Why is the while we all disagree and you really demolished that thought, why do you think this accusation is being made towards India that India lacks strategic culture?
So I'll go over first. Let me answer the question, then I'll talk of something else. Firstly, it is because somewhere we don't want to talk about our achievements and our thoughts, and if you don't sell, nobody's going to buy it. It's as simple as that. The Brits in somewhere, or the Western people who were the leaders in last about 250 years after industrialization, they surged ahead of the civilizations of Persia, China, and India, and they took that leap to start penning thoughts. And most of the thoughts, actually, if you start looking very deeply, they are all copied, pasted from various civilization and just put into good English. And thereafter, the white man's rule ensured that we started actually aping, thinking, referring to them. And if you actually look at this is where the challenge of AI is today. The data which is being fed fast and furious, and I have been telling the policymakers at the top level as well, that while we are not trying to change our books and thoughts in print, nobody is doing it on the digital platform. If you're not going to put stuff after stuff on digital platform, the AI is going to generate what is the Western thought process, again, which has been stolen from us. So we need to talk about it. We aren't proud about our own civilization, our own culture. We want to actually buy more Lakme and everything and become more fairer and look like the Western to look beautiful. Similarly, we need validation from their thought process to achieve. While that validation can be done by the 1/6 of the population which is residing in our country, and virtually about 70% of population which is residing in Asia per se as a continent. So we have got enough people to start validating ourselves actually. So till the time we don't pull away our strategic thought, uh, our belief about ourselves is not going to be there. So I think that is very, very important. And that is why we continue to start believing, following the path which is irrelevant. We need to understand that our DNA, you may change anything, you may adopt any religion, right? Tomorrow there will be a Scientology religion which will be very prevalent here. But your DNA, which is cultural influence of the region, of your climate, weather, what food you eat, will define to continue to make you act in a particular manner. So you may adopt a theory of offensive strategy or hammer, uh, kill the enemy with a hammer, even if you require just a small bullet to fire. But the fact is that we may not be able to apply that because culturally we are different for thousands of years, and that is something which is missing from our country, and that is why we continue to rely on the Western thought actually. So I'll just take 2 minutes to firstly thank Klaus. When I got the call from Dr. Roshan, I was actually thinking ये podcast है, but then she said नहीं नहीं podcast नहीं है, वो आपका book release है, and I was really enamored, right, sir?
Yeah,
So
but and it's also going on the YouTube, so both are correct.
okay, sir. Okay, great. So that was something very interesting, and I'm so grateful for it. And of course, an endorsement when it comes from Claus, because I have been seeing writing and all that the book is of a good quality, the papers are nice. I take it as a great honor, sir, that has been given by you all. But why did I want to write the book, and what is the pillars on which this book is standing? And this is the three pillars on which my papers, which will keep on coming about, and I've already got about 35 40 more papers waiting to be bound into the books. The first pillar is that when the strategy rolls out, it actually pinches the practitioner the most, because unfortunately the academic who guides has never seen the other side of the shell firing, landing, and the sound and the effect and the fear and the tremble which comes out when the shell lands on the other side. And they may talk of reams of paper on leadership, but they can't understand that how leadership evolve when the person is on the receiving end. So you may write very beautiful paper on rolling out infrastructure, but when the infrastructure starts rolling through the towns and cities, through the agricultural farms, in which people have lived there for thousands of years, and they protest, it becomes that much challenging on the practitioner front for that SDM who's going to actually go to from the revenue department to buy the land for the road to roll out. So we'll all want the American roads, wide, straight, beautiful, right? But you don't realize that America was made on a barren land, right? Where they could just draw the line and make the railroad and do out. But in Indian context, you are going to make roads through living cities where it is very difficult to actually divide, because animals are crossing from one side to another every day. How do you change the path of the animals, or through the jungles the elephants was to pass? So those are complexities which person who decides to make a strategy doesn't understand. And nearly for 30 years, I was on the receiving end, on the people, the policy makers who sat and made policies, and we had to implement onto the ground in CICT operations, on line of control, or when handling the Chinese. Goli nahi chalana, hathiyar leke mat jana. But when they come up with aggression, how to deal with it is very, very easy to make three-line policies. But when the soldier is encountered with brutal force, which is going to be pushing him, the diplomacy gets affected. So that is one pillar which I really want to tell the academic environment and strategic environment, that you need to look from the perspective of a practitioner how it pains. The second pillar, which was very important for me, was a very underlying philosophy of restraint, which is driven by our DNA. So if you look at this 12 paper book, on either end, 26 years apart, are two papers: Strategic Restraint of 1999. I was a BM in Operation Kargil. One part, I was part of that operation. And I heard, and I was so consumed by the government of India not allowing us to do what Indian armed forces wanted. But as I grew, I realized these dhoti kurta chaps are far more visionary than the people who are in the crisp uniform or the people who write and talk about it. And 26 years apart, uh, I was possibly one of the only panelists sitting onto the panel and talking about restraint when Pahalgam happened. And people used to actually laugh. You had people like Brahmachalani, you had people, all strategians coming out, and we need to whack Pakistan out into the thin air. And I taught in war college. And I used to tell everybody that the biggest achievement comes of a strategician is to win a war without applying force. I'm not saying that force is not required. Force is most important, critical. And to give a very silly corollary, that 8 feet का जो लट होता है पुलिस के हाथ में, it makes everybody queer like this. That 8 feet का lut is always required, so that engagement and control can continue. But then that is what people forget. Strategic restraint is very important. More so in case you are looking for a vision of 2047 in a Viksit Bharat, Sashakt Bharat. And the third part, which was to bust this very question that we don't have strategic thought. And I really want to write about it. So quite a few of my articles are on strategic thought of India.
Thank you. You've covered multiple issues, and you also covered some things that we wanted to ask you, but we will not leave you so easily. We are going to, enmesh all of them. So I would request you to put in your comments on three, four things, and I'm sure while you were writing this book, a lot of those thoughts must have come to you. One is, you talked about the cultural issues, geographical issues, the way we are, located in the world. And you also talked about Peter Drucker saying culture eats strategy for lunch, for breakfast. So how is it, culturally, India was a world leader. Culturally, we've been a world leader, whatever sphere you may say. So how is it that this aspect needs to be corrected? The other part which you mentioned was, strategic restraint is a tool of the strong. And, whenever it comes to nations engaging, strategic restraint is very important. And, these days people are talking a lot about rationale versus rage. So, how do we get this part right? And very importantly, you mentioned about you have to win the war before it commences. And only then can you ensure victory. So, I would request you, sir, to talk about restraint being a tool of the strong, the cultural issues, and we need to correct those issues. And how do we as a nation start winning the war before it begins?
Okay, the three very, I think you have been able to really take out the soul of the book by three questions which you've asked, and the answers are therefore in the book. First point, I'll start with strategic restraint, and I'll just quote Dinkar. And when I was the war college commandant, I used to have Dinkar written on my Shama Shopti Usi Bujang ko jiske paas kar lo. So if you don't have power, if you're not strong enough, then to say that I'm going to pardon you is something, you're trying to actually befool yourself. So you require to be powerful in some manner. The dying environment, the four elements of power, and I always add technology as a very important subset of this element of power. You need to invest in all these five elements to be able to actually be kind hearted to the rest of the world. The second is, what we don't understand is that when you give something gift, and a lot of time people in India are political leadership, and we go around talking about that we gave line of credit on a very cheap this thing. Earthquake happened, and we reached out. We did X, Y, Z in Tajikistan and so country. In Afghanistan, we are doing so and so. Everything has got a shelf life, right? So when I give you a gift or I receive a gift from a parent, it's got a shelf life of 24 hours, 48 hours, or maybe a year. You just can't keep on coding about it. So while you need a strategy in which you reach out through gifting, through cheap line of credit, the influencer will always remain the empowerment on these five domain. If you aren't powerful, you aren't anybody to be able to do this. The other part of this issue of strategic restraint is that in case I have got an example only, and I think I referred somewhere in the book also, that US, in spite of its humongous power, right? They are about, even today, where China has caught up. China is 1/4 military power of American power. When you say military power, and economic power, I think is about 1/3. Is still way behind America. Which war has America won? And America has not fought. US has not fought even a war, single war on its own. It's fought all its wars with allies, with NATO, after having destroyed a country through what you said, winning the war before starting. So when they will choke, sanction a country, they will destroy the country from within. They will fracture the country through leadership, for Nobel Prize, through variety of system which they have in a country. Then they will get inside. But in the end, if they want to change the behavior of a country, have they been able to actually change it and make the democracy as a primary mover or shaker? I don't think so, right? So therefore, if brutal application of power is going to make a country behave in a different manner, I don't think it's possible. And the second part, especially when strategic restraint is taken in a construct of India, we have to see what you truly want to achieve. And I gave these two examples of 1999. The, the outcome of strategic restraint was this, that if you see this one point, I'm not able to write there, but there's a book which is now coming on Operation Vijay Kargil on institution integrity part, in which I have said very clearly that 1999 becomes the cusp of India's strategic relevance. Till 99, India was a underdog. It is 99, after the strategic strain, the respect in the world environment came huge. It came about why? In 1999, 98 was a strategic construct that we sanctioned in the entire world. People did not like us. Japan, US, Western countries just didn't want to touch. On the other hand, Pakistan, who had carried out the nuclear blast just about a few days after, they became the toast of the town for the Gulf countries, for OIC, because technically it became an Islamic bomb, right? So look at that construct. That point of time, our leadership was actually a minority leadership. 13-day government had just collapsed in 97 or 96. 98, this government came about. Again, it's a coalition government, a weak government. Our military was truly not up to the mark when you compare with the Pakistani support, American alliance, the funding and everything. We are not there. Our country was struggling. 1999, it allowed, the strike restraint allowed. And if you recall, especially the people in uniform will remember, we pushed in Bofors from the desert sectors to come to concentrate power in the area of influence or where it was required. So there you had, out of compulsion by the political dispensation, who said, you're going to restrict your operation into this geographical domain and you will not go beyond the line of control, having the erstwhile line of control, which was breached by Pakistan. And having pushed them back, you will stall there and stay there and you not widen the war, right? So you imagine the concentration of force which allowed us, shifting of force. We were able to do everything which we were wanting to do at that point of time. And the reality which I have not put out into the book is we didn't have adequate ammunition to actually fight a war, to kind of fight a war. And if you had waited for a time to prepare for a full-fledged conventional war, I can thump the table even today. If you have to go to conventional war, it requires minimum 6 years, even if you are totally geared up. But when a situation comes for war, it requires 6 months time to not only to prepare to win even before launching an operation. That means you have to shape the mind diplomatically for a just balance, to go for a cause, create a casus belli. You have to start pushing your training, your assets. You have to have a information warfare. The sixth domain of cognitive warfare has to be put into rolled out properly so that you succeed before you launch. At that point of time, in that May, June time, we didn't have the luxury of all this. Within 3 months or 4 months, if we had waited for that time, the enemy would have been entrenched. Everything with every passing month, possibly our desire to go for a convention would have been delayed. So I think that strategic restraint allowed us so much thing. But the most better outcome which came out, we achieved our end state. Of course, there were casualties, which could have been avoided. But if we had gone for a conventional war, do you think the casualty would have remained at 540 plus officers and men? I think it would be many times much more. Second is that the world recognized our military prowess, that where it was virtually impossible to climb, capture, you require at least 1/12 12 times the forces. We did it with just about maybe twice the amount of forces to carry out an attack, achieve the success. Military prowess established. Our country came out as a responsible country, which understood that conventional war should not be taken recourse. We have achieved our aim, and we are people of peace. The world wants to know people of peace, right? We were able to sell that narrative to the world, and Pakistan stood exposed. The downfall of Pakistan started in 99, actually. It stopped becoming the toast of the West, right? And followed very quickly, just about uh, in 2001, when global war on terror started, actually slid down out of the sight of the Western powers and into the world global community. And India came out as a toast of the world. So I look at 1999 as a strategic restraint as a very, very major this thing. And you actually apply 26 years afterwards in Operation Sindoor, you realize today we are not able to see the advantages of that restraint in Operation Sindoor. Uh, I understood it 5 to 6 years later. I'm very sure when people write lessons of Sindoor, they realize that restraint was the reason that where we are today, possibly in 2047, as a powerhouse of the world, as a country of truly relevance, maybe the third or second economic power and a military power in the world, where the world will look for guidance. Maybe the cause because in Operation Sindoor we didn't roll out the full-fledged power and the might of Indian military. Right. The okay, I'll
Yeah.
just add one part, the geographical and cultural part. Or I can take it afterwards.
Actually, since the matter was being discussed now itself, so I thought, let me interject here. Uh, I will narrate an anecdote and then ask your comments for that. And here I would invite comments of you as well as Jan Kapoor and anybody else. The other day I was giving a talk on Option Dur in Ahmedabad or Gandhinagar to be precise, and it was an Air Force Association event in which I had to speak on. And the topic was lessons from Sindoor takeaways. One of the issues which I highlighted was that India started the war and ended the war at its own terms. And this got picked up by the chief guest there. And he said, sir, while you have taken deliberate pains to explain that we managed the escalation dominance where things ended at our terms, and a tremendous strategic restraint was at display. Of course, I gave the reason that it was essentially because, see, what is our long term aim? Our long term aim is to be a Viksit Bharat by 2047. We cannot afford a war where, a full fledged war, I mean to say, where we would be sent behind by at least minimum 5 to 6 years. That would be the rough cost of war if we have to undertake a full blown war. But the response which I got was that so we were raring to go. We didn't want to stop. Now, what I'm trying to highlight is that there is this gap between the practitioner or the people who implement the strategy and the people who write the strategy, right? How do you how do you break this gap between the practitioner and the strategist, or for that matter the leadership of the country, or at whatever level we decide, whether it is at the CDS level or the prime minister level, that's not a matter of really great concern, because ultimately it is the top leadership which takes this action. So your comments on this aspect of the gap, which is also felt by our command. So first your views, and then General Kapoor, you can also chip in, because you were party to this whole strategic restraint which we exhibited during Op Sindoor.
So, sir, my straight comment on this is that both are relevant. That raring to go, that at the tactical level, the command level, where the lakh, a million, 1.14 lakh or 12 lakh soldiers want to actually get across and kill the enemy, is absolutely very, very important. When we start putting sanity of strategic construct to them, right? If everybody soldier, and that's why I get very worried with scholar soldier. Soldier has to be scholar at his own level. He must know how the enemy at the tactical level or the operational level is going to respond. But if he starts looking at, no, no, we don't have to go to war because possibly we don't have the ammunition which is filled in, the coffers are not there. We will have a implication of this. You'll certainly find that everybody will become scholar and an academic environment, and then application, the jokes which is required at time which is brutal may not happen. So this certain degree of gap must continue to remain, and that is why a parent, a leader needs to take that broad shoulder of the pot shot which will come from the subordinates, right? That you didn't let me go, right? But the parent knows that if I had let you go, possibly you would have run out of steam by the time you reached here. Oh, by the way, the enemy was not only one. There were 2, 3, 4 other enemy wanting to you to get inside so that they will occupy the space which is required to be taken. Oh, by the way, Americans wanted us to go for their reasons. The Chinese will love for us to get into a fight to fight. Uh, the the internal frictions which will win when you lose the war eventually, or even if you have a, let's say, only a 10% of, eventually what is a mission objective which can lay out when you're rolling out a military force is, for example, do you think that can we actually achieve on a short notice war a separation of POJK totally taken under control? And I used to talk, Janpuri is here, a lot of time guys doing high command and everybody, sir, we must go and we can take, we have the capacity. I said, yes, you have the capacity. Do you know, can you handle it? You went to Sri Lanka when the government of Sri Lanka wanted you inside. But when you have to establish control of the population control measures in the current human rights environment, do you think can you handle it? So there is a whole sub-cheat which requires. So therefore, let the political military leadership be the barb of the attack, that we, everybody at the lower level was raring to go, because this raring is also very important, right? Let's say, God forbid, you have to rear and you have to be unleashed. But if you are that thought process provoking, you are going to turn back and ask the question to the political leadership, sir, I require 1,000 drones more. जब तक वो नहीं होगा तब तक मैं नहीं जा सकता. Sir, I want to have 10 second line ammunition more. Without that, I will not go. Sir, who will look after this thing? So then, too much of a thinking at the tactical level may not be right. So I think an appropriate level segregation is always important.
Yes, too much of a thinking at the tactical level is not required. Over to you, Jan Kapoor. You were at both strategic and the operational level at that point in time, so you can throw some light on this.
So, sir, I think you've raised some very important issue about this whole strategic restraint and taking the context of Operation Sindoor. I think the most important part and the takeaway from Operation Sindhu, which should actually be an international example, it should be an international example of strategic calibration. We should call it strategic calibration. And I think there were three, four significant things that happened when this whole planning process took place and the execution took place. One was there was absolute congruence between the policymakers at all levels. And the synergy that was achieved was, whether it was at the National Securities Secretariat, whether it was the political masters, the service chiefs, the senior, there was absolute clarity as to how we have to execute this operation. And I think everybody was absolutely synchronized. There was a great amount of understanding of second and third order effects, what even General Pandey mentioned about what is going to be the second, third order effects. Therefore, in 88 hours, we achieved what had to be achieved. Yes, there is execution was also facilitated, and the ability to you know the, do things was actually you know totally coordinated. And when the adversary sought a ceasefire, even that was discussed. Is this the right time, not the right time, or what are the this thing? And I think it was a perceptional advantage also, that where the adversary is seeking a ceasefire, and if your political aims and your strategic aims have been met, can we calibrate it like this? But there is one infusion that I want to talk about. We are talking. Is there a is there a need now to some way also take on board some of our media personnel, or are they inciting our local population? Because the local population sometimes, or the indigenous population, does not know the second, third order effects. And like you said, we are raring to go. If you go on the streets of Delhi or any other city in Delhi, we should have done this, we should have done that. I think there is a need also to take on board. I am not going to be, politically incorrect to say we need to educate the media, because nobody can educate the media. So we need to just take them on board and get them to because when a nation executes a strategy, it's a national strategy. It is not just a military or a security strategy.
Just to the last point about media, let me share the fact that in a democracy, it would be futile to actually control the media. I think media also has some sensible people. If you remember Mumbai attacks, and people realized that media had done a fatal mistake of describing things which were still in the process of operations, and later on they have shied away from doing such things. I think we will get a better media as it's a churn which is going on. And over to you now. You can carry on. I think General Pandey had some
Yeah,
points.
I just about the media. I must firstly, uh, I avoided coming on the media till Pahalgam happened, and then one was compelled to come after my retirement. But let me. I have handled media as a 8G Stratcom. I must put upfront. They are not sitting here. That possibly they are one of the as patriotic as anybody can be. If you tell them, you have to inform that this doesn't have to be covered. They will not cover, right? But to put a blanket ban on covering anything at all is something very flawed. We are democracy, and this should be allowed. The other part, that when they incite passion of a country, it why do you think that it may have been allowed? You have to look at this. If you don't incite passion, everything is hunky dory, sab theek thaak hai, Shriman. It's all right, Pahalgam happened. How do you create Chesed Balam? If just everybody shuts, Pahalgam happened, and people should just keep quiet over it, it's all right. It's a terrorist strike which has happened. We lost 26 people. We are a mature nation. We'll deal with Pakistan in a very manner. How do you generate the cause, Justice Balam, causes belly for going across? right? Do you think the Western people are going to come and tell you, no, no, something is happening? So there is some merit. The second is there's a constituency. When you excite inside, it also allows that bubble to go away from inside, right? So I have used, I'll not say used, I have been with media, and actually they do a great service. And I think in this time, don't look at the negative, because everybody who's sitting here are rational thinkers. But your entire 1.4 billion population not rational. There are people who want to have something else to actually start believing, and let that constituency go out. They are not dictating policy. You imagine if this whole thing was not happening on social media and media, was there a compulsion for a political dispensation to take a call? We would have not taken it. Let's say if you suppress the entire thing. So I think there is a method without a formal organization, and having been from the inside, I can just say that there were so many information. I'm walking into a studio, the reporters, the young boys are telling me that information which nobody had, and is not coming on television, right? So I can assure you they are as responsible, accountable. We may not feel otherwise, but they are pretty good about it. The second is, I'll just quickly talk about we achieved a mission objective, which is defined. Killing of 26 civilians, does it justify war or not, is matter of debate. How much was enough? This decision to take how much is enough doesn't come easy. Americans entered Afghanistan. They had to come out after 20 years. They could not define their end state. Eventually, they had kicked out by Taliban, right? You look at Russia, they have not been able to define how much is enough. You look at Europe, they are not able to define how much is enough. You look at Israel, they are not able to define how much. So power doesn't allow you to get this thing. That political strategic level maturity, which I give to my military leadership today and the political leadership, is the one which decided how much is enough, right? And it's very difficult to achieve.
So, sir, coming back to the book, but I know so that we don't totally run out of time, and we get some of your other thoughts on this thing. Over this conversation, 2-3 important points you've made. One is that this whole dime construct, diplomatic, information, military, economic, has transitioned to timed. So, because technology is important, technology sovereignty is important. So I think we should now start talking of timed, and that is what you brought out. Also, coming back to this aspect of strategic restraint and taking a cue from your book, where the then foreign minister in 1999, Mr. Jaswant Singh, said, if we go to battle or if we go to war, for India, it will be just like a cut on the finger, but we will bleed Pakistan's economy. So there was this strategic restraint because it came from a position of strength. And the third very significant thing that you brought out is it shifted international relations. It's actually shifted international relations. The 99 construct actually shifted it. And I think that just at Bellum was one of the reasons where, everybody, the whole international media, the international community was talking about India, totally justified, and the kind of force calibration that India did was totally justified. And with the courage and the indomitable spirit of the Indian soldier, we were able to achieve our aims. And also, coming from this whole media thing, it was also the first televised war in India. And there was a huge, that is one part that I would like to ask you. But the largest thing that I would like to ask you is, today when we look at the way we are sitting in the geopolitical space, we are on the cusp, and geographically we are at a very critical location of this great power competition. Last time when the great power competition took place, we were some 3,000 miles away. This time the great power competition is happening in our neighborhood. So are there any prescriptions that you would like to give to the strategic community, to the practitioners, to the policymakers, or to people in academic circles, so that jointly we together as a nation put across our strategic thoughts, our narratives, our perceptions. The second thing is, along with this, since we talked about information as a tool, so how do we utilize this, particularly when the world, and quoting again from your book, 60% of the world's population uses smartphones. So, how do we use this tool effectively? And the third part, which I'll request you to cover, and is there a, we keep talking about just at bellum, and the people who have written maximum of just at bellum, I do not know whether they follow it or not, whether they really follow it. But when you read Manu, the Indian scriptures, that was the origin of just at bellum, and how war has to be really executed and conducted. So, is there a moral compass in this whole aspect? So, I'll leave it to you, sir.
Yeah. So beautiful way you have actually taken out. I think I have not read the book for a long time, but now when you're talking about it, things just fall in place. Just at Balam for Indian thought, for a thought of Bharat is very, very important. Our relationship in home, between family, within the society, between nations, because after all, we were large number of kingdoms. Everything resided on a thing called moral compass, and that is all our books, everybody talks of it, unknown to us, in spite of, everybody has not read the Western philosophies, and they will not read all these great authors from the West. But yet, why is it that? And I'm sure our politicians have just not read any of the Western books. Why do they keep on talking about the moral compass of application of power? So I guess it is just inane through readings of Mahabharata, from reading of Ramayana, from listening about Gita. Somewhere it comes from growing years of just at Balam. For us, just at Balam is very, very important. In case of the Western powers, which are very new powers, right? And you look at the decline of these new powers, it is evidenced. We are 5,000 years recorded civilization, right? We have been hammered from outside and inside, but yet we continue to persevere. And this civilization, which started, let's say, about 500 years back or 600 years back, has started to actually decay, degrade. It is happening in front of us, and they are talking of it, right? It will happen faster if India is not there, right? Today, majority of your Western Christian powers cannot celebrate Christmas in their own country. And you go out in night in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, even in the smallest of cities, on the street side, you'll have those young, the Santa Claus caps and colors, and uh, 80% of Hindus are celebrating Christmas, right? So you look at, that's why I'm saying that they have to recognize, and yesterday I made a statement somewhere else, that they have to recognize the resilience of Bharat as a mature nation, as mature people, and they must invest time and energy in us. And that is why for us, Jasad Balam is always with a moral compass. And if you recall what Lord Krishna tells Arjun, that you need to at times fight your own, because there's a just cause for this thing. So that is in our ethical way of conduct. While everything could have been done much more before, but we always try and value the moral compass in application in dealing with anybody, right? I think that is so important to us, and I've talked about it in my two papers in that this thing. The second is, which you talked of information tool as a central, and you very rightly said timed, right? Today, time used to be very important, diplomacy, information, and stuff like. But the sequence change which you have given by saying time, is very, very central today. While diplomacy needs to carry the baggage of time, right? But if you are not technologically empowered, and that is where India, which is about 2 decades behind, about 3 to 4 decades behind the Western or Japanese, which are manufacturing hubs of everything in the world, we can actually jumpstart by investing in time, because the new systems are coming. AI, ML, all these things are something totally new, even for the world, right? While they may be quite ahead in defense manufacturing and other manufacturing, but the brain part, which will drive the next set of revolution, is through technology. And through technology, everything which is thereafter in time is resides on that, right? So one is that, and second, which is very important, is informational. To win a war, before actually they say that you can kill a womb, what do you call, you can kill a child in the womb by telling the mother that your child is going to be XYZ tomorrow, and she may take that call. You can do it by shaping the mind. You can win. And if you recall, it was used not today, it has been used for centuries. The Huns will come, or the people who came from the west to our country, they came by killing villages en route who did not follow the path. And when the message landed up, big powers gave up without fighting, because the information reached them that in case you ally with the offensive power, howsoever it is, our women, our children, our kingdom will be left alone. So information was always used as a tool, but it took time. Today in the digital space, you need to develop capacities today. Why do you think? And I have gone on record to say somehow we continue to lose the battle of narrative. And there's a very beautiful talk I gave somewhere when they talked of battle after battle. And when they meant battle after battle, was Operation Sindoor the second battle and battle narrative the first battle. That means the narrative battle after this thing. But I look at it, the battle before battle is more important. That means you need to shape your own environment's mind, you have to shape the world's environment, you have to shape the enemy's mind to make him believe that what you have done is wrong and disallow him to win the battle of narrative before actually even landing the first punch. And that is why information is very important. And unfortunately, while we, like everything in our country, which bumbles like that elephant and continues to, gate crash the jungles. In information, also, we continue to do the same thing, because we got an immensely loyal population who wants to continue to believe in us, right? But in the rational world, information requires huge amount of this thing, and we need to learn from the corporates. And I've talked about it. Corporate, I've taken example of Al Qaeda, which was my. I wrote about Al Qaeda using information as an element somewhere when there was not even a single book on Al Qaeda or an article was there. And I gave prescription on it, how the world needs to handle Al Qaeda in the informational domain. Because Al Qaeda and ISIS do not have geographical control. They don't tend over technology. They don't own what do you call military. They don't have economic powerhouse. They don't have diplomatic community. So all the five element of power which a nation possesses, they don't have a geography. But yet there's a guy in Bondi Beach who, being radicalized through Al Qaeda element on this thing, goes out. Father and son team goes out and continues to kill people onto a beach on where people are celebrating Hanukkah. Right? You imagine the mind. So the power of information to dissuade, to shape the mind, we have to start understanding, and we need to compete. And again, I talked of somewhere before that in case today our civilization thought, our viewpoint as India is not going to be actually put onto the AI. Every time when you ask Gemini, they will continue to give out something else which may not be actually true, right? So therefore, we need to embrace, we need to have a formal structure which should technically not only report to PMO if possible, otherwise should be part of a NSCS with arms to guide. Ministry of INB, which is a bureaucracy-led organization, can never ever do. right? It has to be public-private partnership. And I am a very, very great proponent of private ownership. The country has not been able to invest in private systems. I think we need to reach out to people who are far more smarter, because today there are, when you ask for bharti kind of a thing, government job, you can't hire more than 10 Gen Z. But if you actually want to know how to run information campaign, you require thousands of them who can actually work for 2 years, 3 years, gravitate to something else, but they should become the sword arm of our this thing. And therefore, I'll keep at this. The last point which you talked about, geographical centrality of this thing. Somehow, this issue is not understood by our strategic community, and we have not been able to actually plan for what is happening today, right? When you rise, and for especially for the children who are sitting on the other side, you must know that we came from ashes of what the Britishers left us. We were not in minus. We were dead onto in terms of national power and everything. We had nothing. And where we are today is actually resilience of our Indian innovation, imagination, capacity to actually continue to evolve and survive and thrive. We this rise can never be without friction, right? किसी भी मोहल्ले के अंदर जब एक गुंडा होता है, वो दूसरे गुंडे को बाहर बड़ा नहीं होने देता, because this will happen at cost. Anybody starts believing that it will be the rise can be together is not possible, right? Because there are two contests which are happening. One is resource and second is market, right? To be able to fulfill aspirations of domestic population, which keeps a government in power and place, the political leadership in power and place, you require to contest for the resources which will provide you, produce and give market. And this has been theory of state leadership and everything for centuries or forever. So this rise of India, which is seen as a threat by the Chinese quite early on, and there was a friction which will continue to remain. Now there is a thought process which has been fueled in the American system, which they did not realize it till about 4 to 5 years back. There's a last about half a decade after this present Modi government has come about, is that India in the future is going to be a threat the way Chinese is, and therefore we need to scuttle this rise today so that we can handle China as the only enemy rather than acknowledging. And that is where our information was required. In case our information domain was powerful enough, we could have told the true narrative that India's rise is for its own people. It is not a competitive power or a race. We will always be, and I want to give an example like Cholas. When Cholas were ruling the high seas, they were never losing it by brute force, right? They did not expand beyond the chain of Malaysia, Indonesia, that island chain going into China. And the time the Chinese power, the Han power, was not as strong, as diminishing. So truly, Cholas should have tried to expand beyond going towards Japan, going towards Taiwan, going towards China, which we didn't do. So that is a nature of Bharat. Bharat for so many millenniums has remained constrained because of geography. Towards south, we had mighty seas. Towards the north, we had mighty Himalayas. That boxed in, and the nature was so good to us. It gave everything which is there in the world within this narrow confines of so-called Bharat. When you look at from Afghanistan to Himalayas and to northeast, this box was always there, and that is why Bharat Rashtra, right? Kautilya Chandragupta talks of not the Kautilya talks of Rashtra. It doesn't talk of nation. Nation is very, very limited Western concept, and that is why you have large number of European nations, right? They follow one faith, but there are so many of them. You have got so many countries in OIC, but if you look at our country, the diffused population in terms of language, eating habit, cultural ethos is so diffuse that you can't draw a line to divide any of us, right? That's a uniqueness of our this thing. And this geography today, and my advice to them, we need to use this geography to continue to build up a maritime force, which influences on one side through the island chains, which are from Malacca and all those straits, and onto the second, rest on Oman and going on till Africa, engage with these countries as much as possible because we need to control this area through which virtually about 70% of our world's trade, world's energy, everything flows across. So that is one very, very important part. The second is we need to think about how to engage China. China is actually not a warfaring nation. They have never won a war. They have also been brutalized for a period of time. Their only requirement is market access or access from resource so that they can be unlocked from the constraints which are going to be the American constraint, right? And they are looking for this. So, can we actually see how we can allow this thing to happen so that instead of looking at Pakistan, Myanmar, or elsewhere, we can allow certain degree of uh, a joint effort with them? Because if we have to live in Asia, we need to live alongside China, which is going to continue to remain ahead from us. We can't catch up until unless we actually have a GDP rise which will actually truly burn our economy, which is not possible, right? Or we come up with some disruption of technology which will allow us. And the third is that we need to leverage our industrial capacities to reach out to actually the global south, and that's happening. But more importantly, I think we need to reach out to the Gulf, to OIC. They may be trying to overtly reach out to Pakistan, but inside they know that the radicalization which comes through Pakistan uh, is going to actually affect them because they're all kingdoms, they're all royalties, and the threat of radicalization and getting killed is much, much more real there than anywhere in the country. In the
Sir,
world.
thank you, sir. You covered a large landscape, but we're totally running out of time, and I have to open the house for our audience who are, eagerly waiting to ask you some questions and some of their thoughts. But you raised some very important issues, and I'll just quickly summarize them so that and contextualize it for our next conversation. One is your neighbors you don't choose, but you have to live with them. You made a mention of that. The second thing is the criticality of information. I think historically and traditionally, India, I will only quote an example of Mahabharat, Ashwathama,
Yeah.
who died. That is the criticality of information. The mediums may change. The third thing is we are today in the info age. So you don't have to have sequential development. We don't have to go through the pain points which others went through. We can have a different model altogether. And in this information age, intelligentization is important. And that is where we have to use this 1.4 billion strong population. How do we dominate the geostrategic space? I think, once again, many compliments for the book. Thank you very much for your thoughts. I'll now open the.
I think that was the point which should not be confused with war fighting. War fighting is different. Strategy is different. Strategy can be for anything. Strategy can be for national level, some policy on some infrastructure development. Strategy is it's a process, and that process has to be a macro process. So we leave it at that. And I would like to once again the thank General Kapoor for having spared his time for a book discussion with General Pandey. This book, as such, is generating a lot of interest. And so, accordingly, I promised him that we will take, I think, 5 copies each of his 2 books. And we will try to further progress it in various events which we do. We do get enough people to buy our books which are there. And so that is as far as the return gift for General Pandey is concerned. And I would like to close this event with just one statement that food for thought for you all and for General Pandey and General Kapoor. Dhurandhar and strategic reflections. Just look at it and just think about it. How much of it is reflecting with the book which he has written. It's about practitioners, what they do. I mean, there are certain things in a movie which are always blown up for the interest of the public, but go to the meat of the entire movie. It has been very beautifully captured by a well-known journalist in Indian Express, and he says this is the way to have a movie with embedded government in it. Now, this line of embedded government in it is a strategy, right? It's a strategy which may give some ideas to young people. Thank you very much to each one of you for having come here, and Jai Hind.